Welcome to the Smart Thinking Podcast. This is my dad, Ted.
Welcome to the Smart Thinking Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Knightsky. All right, it's Midway energy time. That's right. Here we are entering the mid-year of the school year, the mid-year of your projects, the mid-year of lots of things. And it is time to start to talk about what is a process that we can put in place to support the energy needed to get us through the end of the project, the end of the year, or the end of anything. The last couple of episodes have been about reflection and goal setting. Well, it's time to talk about energy. Energy throughout your leadership and the role we all play in bringing it to others, and the role we play in making things happen. Whew, you saw bingo in the title, so you know something's about to happen. All right, so energy to complete the task comes from something that I call MC squared. I dropped the E. MC squared, no E. I'm not an Einstein, but a student once pointed out to me that my name spelled backwards was Eichstein, to which I said, that's not even close, Einstein. Anyway, MC squared is the leadership concept around creating the energy needed to support staff. M stands for milestones. C, the first C, is communication, and the second C is celebration. Recently, I was working with some teams, and they were concerned about the fatigue their colleagues were showing. It is literally the midway point of many school years and projects taking place. And I simply asked, how are you making sure people know where they are on the journey and communicating to them their progress, their positives, their opportunities for improvement, and their successes? And then, how are you visibly reinforcing those efforts through celebrations? Things that people who've been through my trainings know I call sheet cake moments. The milestone awareness, communicated to them, and then celebrated. MC squared. Why is this type of process important? Well, it's important because we are all of the time, leading. And a leader, as you know, is anyone who has influence over another person. And the most subtle steps and processes can amplify other leadership by supporting their ability to find success with, keyword there, with others. That's right. Supporting leadership by making sure they have the ability to find success with others. Because a leader is all of us and all of the time. Every moment of every single day, we are walking through what we think are just our regular motions. And people are watching us. People are coming to us. People are seeing how we respond, what processes we employ, the energy we bring, the actions we take, and most importantly, the way in which we interact with other people. We are constantly modeling for people who we don't know what position they are in their life at that moment, whether they are mentally strong, that they are fatigued, that they are concerned, that they are anxious, that they are vulnerable, that they are in a position where they don't know what to do. And there you come, hopping along, whistling through your day like nothing is going on, and then you do something to them that is remarkable, which is just being you. And how do we do that? Well, we do that as leaders by driving two key behaviors over and over and over again. The first is being empathetic and asking ourselves, what do the people in front of us need from me at this time? What would it be like to be that person in front of me? And if I were them, what would I need if I were in this situation? And then, of course, delivering on it. And the second is reflection. The best leaders take action and seek input, either through reflection on their own actions or asking other people, what did I do well and what could I change? And what wonderings do you have about my actions or myself? And most importantly, just sitting down each day and asking yourself those questions so that you can take the time to think, take the time to reflect, and most importantly, asking yourself what worked so that you can repeat it over and over and over. And this is likely coming from a place of strength for you. All right. And we always do that in one way, and that is like the buffalo. That's true every single day for you. And why it's true for you every single day is because every day you're going to face some sort of a problem, some sort of a storm. And when you do, you have a choice. Are you going to go to it or are you going to run from it? Because we're not cows. We don't turn our tails to the storms and walk away from them. We at least face them. We face them and we find others. We face them finding others and we grow the courage it takes to go to them. And then when we get in them, we run hard. Because That's what we do. We're leaders. We're optimists who bet on ourselves. Okay, so we do all that. So what we need to do is find ways to support others in playful and engaging ways. And I believe this can be done by creating simple and visual support processes that allow people to track where they are on the journey of their life, their work, or their day, and find ways to celebrate those steps. Admittedly, I look past this type of process because I have this strength. Now, if you're a Clifton person, I have a few key strengths where I don't really need a vision board or I don't need to see the process because I envisioned it a long time ago, because I have this really cool strength of being futuristic, strategic, and then a learner, because I see it, I find a way to do it, and then I learn along the journey. But not everybody's like that. And I had to learn that the hard way by continually being in rooms with people where I would lay out a vision and I would be like, well, we should be at this point by now. And they would say things like, how was I supposed to know that? Well, it's an unspoken expectation, so it can never be met. And as I've heard my wife say to me a few times, Ted, I can't hear your thoughts. So we've got to get them out. However, the best way to do that is through process and play. I've learned that many people are not observing their milestones naturally. They're just really looking towards the end, and they're not taking the small steps as they go around the corner, as they're climbing their mountains, to stop and look back and say, wow, we have come really far. And usually it's because there's no leader there to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, pause, look what you've done. So I truly believe that the most important thing for us to recognize as leaders is that many initiatives die because of the lack of understanding where people are at in the process, and leadership loses energy to follow through on their own expectations. I mean, just the other day, someone said to me, I'm really impressed, Ted, that you've stuck with this whole buffalo thing this long. I was like, what? Why is that? And they said to me, well, honestly, most leaders bounce from idea to idea and metaphor to metaphor and book to book, and we've just kind of stuck with the buffalo thing. And I thought, true dat. That's right, because this really works. All right, so what do we do? Well, I was inspired to create this tool this week when I was interviewing someone for the podcast over the course of the week. And I heard myself say, this whole thing was not on my bingo card for life. And then it hit me, bingo! Bingo. It's the best game in the world. It's something that everybody understands. It's something that keeps you engaged. It's something that's slightly competitive, but it's really about you and tracking where you are so that you understand what's going on and where you're at. So why not play bingo in your organization with everything that you're doing? But before I explain bingo, I have to, after all, tell you a quick story. When I was a kid, I grew up in my little town here, Port Washington, Wisconsin. I went to a parochial school, and I was a Boy Scout, Cub Scout, and Webelow, Pack 3855. And there were lots of opportunities for our large scout troop to do all different types of volunteer work across our community. So I remember projects like cleaning cemeteries, going down and walking the beach and cleaning the beach and finding all kinds of fun stuff on the beach that people had left or that had washed up. I remember clearing forests and doing all different types of fun community service projects. But my favorite community service that we did, my favorite volunteering, was at our church for bingo night. As a kid, bingo night was crazy, especially when you had jobs. And I need to give context to you all for this, because I was a scout in the early 1980s, which frankly sounds like a gajillion years ago. But I want you to imagine a cafeteria filled with the same lunch tables we ate lunch on Monday, filled with grandmas and grandpas, moms and dads, aunts and uncles, all smoking, all drinking. And our job was to sell and replace all the disposable cards, collect the dimes per card, and then, as they were playing bingo, go around and fill coffee cups, empty ashtrays, and deliver other quote-unquote beverages that the men's club was selling over in the corner. Bingo night was a fun night. I just want you to imagine this room. This room was smoke-filled. It was energetic. It was fun and funny. I mean, I fortunately was pretty short in grade school and middle school, so I could actually see the line of fog cigarette smoke above my head as it rose up to the ceiling. And it answered a question for me when I was a kid, which was, why was the cafeteria ceiling yellow? From bingo. But it was a blast. Our principal was the bingo caller, or our scout leader was the bingo caller, and sometimes there were guest bingo callers, but whatever was going on, there was always a bingo caller up there. And once in a while, if the numbers weren't hitting on the cards, she'd call a scout up to draw a ball out of the cage, and someone would yell out excited if they won on that number, and they'd wink at you or wave their cigarette in your direction like, yeah, thank you. I mean, think of this. Smoke-filled room, pipes, cigarettes, old folks laughing and shouting, and us little scouts excited to participate in this culture. The best part was how the room would come together really quickly around certain numbers when they were pulled. Now, any bingo players on this, listening to this podcast today, will understand these exactly. Because, as a matter of fact, it only took you about 30 minutes as a little scout to learn all the little fun puns and sayings that were pulled. Like when they would call B4, and then everybody in the room would, in harmony, yell out, B4, and after. I remember one little guy yelling out, when he heard B12, he yelled out, vitamin B12, take your vitamins. I-24, somebody would always yell out 2 dozen. N-44, somebody would yell out all the fours. G-55, double nickels. O-64, oh, how I wish I still was. There was one other number that would be called out, and many times, well, the scouts would get in trouble for giggling. Anyway, bingo was amazing. As the night would go on, they would start switching up how to win. If I remember correctly, bingo went from like 7 to 9 o'clock at night once a month. And at about 8 o'clock, all of a sudden they'd yell out, double, 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 double. And full cards would be sold very quickly because you could win twice. And it was a full card bingo. 2 winners, double, double. So what would happen is you'd get your card and it was a full card bingo. So as soon as all of your squares were filled, you won. And then there were 2 winners, so it wasn't just one. Everybody was engaged. The room would erupt. Scouts would be flying around selling extra bingo cards. Dollar bills would be coming out instead of dimes. It was a very exciting time of the night. And what otherwise would be people not buying bingo cards at all, they'd open their steel trap wallets and they'd be excitedly buying them for the double-double. There was a really long pause before the double-double would start so everyone could go to the restroom and fill up their coffee cups and get their cigarettes from their car because it was a big thing. This game would take a while, sometimes up to an hour. And the prizes were huge, like $10. And the energy would tick up a bunch. I mean, we're not talking diagonal or straight line only cards, or even just 4 corners. We're talking the whole shebang. This game sometimes took the entire hour and people would be looking at everyone else and you'd see people get to one number left on their card and just sit there anxiously staring and waiting. And then you'd see someone else hit like 4 numbers in a row and that other person would get all anxious. But everyone was paying attention and everyone was engaged and everyone was communicating. And every time a number was pulled, you'd hear an audible, oh. We'd be running around emptying ashtrays, getting matches for people. It was amazing. It was actually crazy. As scouts, we'd be walking around and we'd get an idea of who would be winning and we would stare at each other and point down like, oh, Mrs. Schmidt over here is pretty close. And then they would be like, no, Mrs. Mueller, she's doing even better. Then you'd hear B4 and the room would yell out, and after, and someone would shout out the magic words, bingo! Normally there'd be frustration, but people would be even more energized because we kept going because it was a double-double. So one winner pulled it out. As we were looking for the second winner, there'd be even more energy because people in the whole room were getting closer and closer and closer. And then you'd hear I-22 and people would shout out double ducks because 2 2s look like ducks. And then someone would yell out bingo! And there we'd be. Everyone was paying attention because everyone knew where they stood and everyone was in. After the double-double, people around the room, well, they'd play a couple more and we'd end up the night with a rapid corners, a 4-corner game or free game. And then the scouts would clean up the 7,000 pounds of cigarettes in the ashtrays, mostly finding many of them that were floating in styrofoam cups with a third of the container still filled with coffee and cigarettes. Ugh, I can still smell that unbelievable combination. Anyways, bingo night was fun and people were engaged and people were paying attention. And people were looking at each other and asking each other. I remember one night was crazy. Somebody won the double-double by themselves. They had 2 cards that hit one after another. The place went wild. Accusations of cheating and this can't be were thrown out. But at the end of the day, memorable night. People left engaged and happy, and it didn't cost much, and they celebrated on their way out the door. And those who didn't win would always say the same thing: better luck next time. I share this because the process I have for you is to play bingo with your team midway through the year. Yeah, play bingo. You see, we're all trying to figure out where we are on the journey. We don't have a visual. Imagine having a visual like a bingo card, where every time you completed something, you could stamp down and know that that had been done, that it was on your bingo card, and we are getting closer and closer to double-double, a fully filled bingo card. We're also trying to figure out if we're on track, or if we're even close to on track. And my challenge for you is to ask yourself, what visuals do you create in your organization, classroom, boardroom, or wherever to ensure that people understand where they stand midway towards the end? There's always a great deal of energy and excitement when we launch things. There's quick reminders and quick communications and lots of positive reinforcement at the beginning. But let's face it, folks, we get tired. We don't know if we want to keep putting energy into it. So here's how the process works. And really, it's very easy. What I want you to do is I want you to simply type out all the milestones between now and the end of the year, or now and the end of the project, or the end of the semester, or whatever, and then create bingo cards. Wait, it's not that simple. Let me give you a little more on this. Because people need a visual indicator for how to track where they are on a journey, like a map. People need to be engaged in the process. You can tell them to look for certain things, but they're not always looking. And if you can find a way to announce the milestones and people can playfully keep track, well, that becomes a winning combination to get you to understand the milestones, communicate those milestones, and celebrate them. MC squared. All right, let me give you a couple of examples here. Let's take the second semester of a school year and create a bingo card. There are 25 squares on a traditional bingo card. There are many more things going to happen between now and the end of the year than 25 things. However, you can create endless amounts of things to put on these bingo cards into these squares. So reflect with me for a moment. If we created a list of things for the second semester, we could put things on that bingo card just to engage people. Things like MLK Day, President's Day, formative testing, turnabout dances, basketball playoffs, musical, beginning of the spring seasons, orchestra concerts, parent-teacher conferences, field trips, guest speakers, registration, spring break, when the seasons begin for co-curriculars and athletics, professional development days, different benchmarks that had to be coming in place for the kids and the staff. And then each time one of those things were out there, you could include it in your newsletter, your daily announcements. Today's bingo is President's Day. If you have President's Day on your classroom bingo card, please click that now. And then, of course, you can be playing diagonal and four corners and up and down, straight letters, doesn't matter. And at the end of the year, everyone's bingo card should be filled. Again, this is just a simple example because you want to create a visual to keep people engaged. The second semester of a school year can be really, really tough. It doesn't matter where you live. You can be listening to this in Florida or in Michigan because this is a long journey and people don't know always where they stand. And then when the journey's over, we tend to forget a lot of the things that we did. Basically, it's the calendar and all of the important days of the second part of the year. This is the simplest of ways to engage in MC squared. Milestones, communicated, and celebrated. We did it. Let's take something more complicated, like a legit implementation. Something difficult to visualize, something difficult to understand where you are on the journey, and something even harder to understand if it's going well. So, let's take these action steps and put them into a bingo card. Let's take the launch of an initiative, the check-in on the progress of the initiative, all of the things we should be looking for on the journey, like this should be submitted on this day, and you should have these benchmark done and benchmark completed, and the milestones, listing all of the steps and all of the deliverables and all of the feedback loops and everything that people have to individually do, measures of indicators of success, and then the final date that it all has to be done. Now, I rattled that off pretty quickly, but I want you to think about something that you are currently in the middle of. And I want you to think about what are the steps to completion. And then I want you to think about putting those on a bingo card, distributing those bingo cards and having people monitor their bingo card because that'll keep them engaged. How about in the classroom? You could take a unit or a project that has steps and put them all on the bingo card. You could take the second semester if you're a classroom teacher. You could do things like classroom tests, assessments, formative school assessments, the summative assessments. You could take projects and break them down. Day of launch, how you should be at the end of the first day, what things you should be doing, the steps you take, the books you should be reading, the different components that it will take to be successful on this project or unit, and put them on a bingo card. And you can just put them up in the front of the whole class and say, B12. And then you can say, this is where you should be today. Again, it's a simple process, but you have to think through how to make it relevant for yourself. The bingo card should always be visible and played publicly. Each time a new step is achieved, the bingo square description should be visibly celebrated. People should have these hanging in the rooms, cubicles, or offices. The announcement should be loud and proud. Here we are, N39. Bingo is simple. Okay, finally, the resource for this. Because you're probably thinking to yourself, I would have to draw and create all these bingo cards, Ted. You must be out of your mind. Nope. Friends, there's a website that I use to create these called myfreebingocards.com. It will create 1 or 2 custom bingo cards. I can't remember, but if you want to get a bunch of them, it's very inexpensive to have that thing customize all of the bingo cards. You can enter a full list of anything from an existing spreadsheet, and it will create a custom bingo card for each line that you enter. You can make just one with all the steps, or you can make it competitive and playful and add 50 different look-fors, 100 different look-fors, 200 different look-fors. It doesn't matter. You drop them all in there, and it randomizes and creates bingo cards for your whole community. I usually make 50 random cards, and I'll give them out to people 2 cards at a time for them to play. Now, that's just a simple little thing that I've learned over time is that if I give people multiple bingo cards, they have multiple opportunities to win. And just like when I was a scout and I would see all those cute people with their little dot jammers hitting the numbers, bang, 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 on all of their bingo cards, you would see them watching. They would pay attention to the bingo card. They would know what was on the bingo card. They would understand the steps they need to take and where they are, and they would celebrate when they would get things in a row, 4 corners, or fill the whole thing. Why would I do this, Ted? Well, do you care about the engagement of others? Do you want people to be on the positive receiving end of communications? Do you want to see the celebration in people's faces when they've completed things because you've put in place a process? Do you want a clear understanding of where we are in the process individually as an individual in a classroom, a school, a business, a fire department, wherever you are? I think you do. And I think when you put up a visible bingo card with all the steps, people start to pay attention. This is a great supplemental tool if you're using a step diagram or gap chart process, a current state to desired state with the steps in the middle. Because when you're working in a complicated or convoluted environment with lots of stuff going on, it's important to have some element of play to support engagement. People might see the steps, but not really understand what's going on in between them. And then, when you publicly put up these bingo cards or step diagrams, people do 2 things. They get curious and they want more information because they want to make sure that they are in the know. They want to make sure they're where they're supposed to be. They want to make sure that they can shout out bingo. A visible, playable process gets people doing something that is more critical than any continuous improvement process because they're engaged. And the one thing that's going to happen more than anything else is that people are going to start talking. That's right. Midway is so important because talking is going to drive the energy to move us forward. People talking to each other, people asking questions, people sharing the success. Midway is important, and the absolute best thing we could have is our leadership talking about where they are in the journey, spending their energy looking forward and not getting sucked into the traditional nothing ever sticks around here narratives that tend to drive cultures. The best and most fun way to get people talking is by communicating with frequency, their progress, celebrating their effort, and meeting people's needs to be a part of something that's very meaningful. So how do you do that? You put things on people's bingo cards that matter to their own success. You play it as an organization. You celebrate as an organization. You find ways to bring energy to the midpoint of the year. And you create incentives for people that are engaged by acknowledging their diagonal victories, their straight line victories, and everyone every day working to have the entire bingo card filled by the time the year or the project is over. You know what I bet? I bet you didn't have this idea on your leadership bingo card. So let's do some smart thinking. List current initiatives that you could use a little boost for. Describe how you provide energy midway in your classroom, school, department, or office. And finally, determine how you're going to celebrate effort in order to bring energy. That's it. That's the Smart Thinking Podcast. Hey, as always, thank you for listening, and please make sure to share this episode with others. Help me help as many people as possible on their mid-year journey to support their success, and most importantly, yours. Thank you for rating this episode. Thank you for giving me feedback. Thank you for sending me notes, and thank you for just being you. And finally, I want to thank the Well Pennies and Golden Bear Studios for their awesome music. I'm pretty fortunate that I get to use real music on my podcast, and many of you have listened to the Well Pennies and helped propel them on their Spotify and iTunes platforms so that we can keep their awesome music alive. So thank you, Brian and Sarah. And finally, as we close out, why is this all important? Why is it so important to take processes like this and not just assume that we're all leaders and not just assume everybody's an optimistic person with the energy to charge into the storms that we're facing? Why is it important? Because engagement of others is critical. If people feel that they have the skills and the support in order to do what they need to do, they'll do it, and they'll do it well. Leading people is important as well because processes like this help us keep people in their strength zones, allowing them to be the best versions of themselves by leaning into what they know about themselves and then finding the way to get there because you are providing the mid-year milestones or map that allows them to do it. I mean, do you know the energy when a leader, like a hierarchical leader, walks into a room and there's a bingo card and it's all blotted out and there's only 4 squares left, and the leader looks and acknowledges and says, I really appreciate that you're playing. I really appreciate that you're engaged. I really want you to know how grateful I am that you are helping us on the journey, because this help is helping the mission, which is helping many more people than just the 2 of us. Finding ways to motivate people is not easy. And that's why it's time to celebrate through play. It's time to celebrate when we hit milestones. It's time to celebrate by communicating how we've hit those milestones. And finally, it's important to celebrate, period. If people don't know where they are on the journey, they don't quit. They wait. They wait for several things. They wait for others to join, others to energize them, others to help guide them, others to collaborate with them, others to be able to work with and find support and understanding for them, and others to celebrate with. We need to stop waiting, and we need to start doing. And when you play bingo, bingo is long. It's not a short game, but it's predictable, and it's fun with others. It creates a synchronicity, before and after. Processes drive us forward when things get tough, and that's what we have to remember. If we can play and energize each other, well, we're going to be doing just fine. Because communication helps us understand where we are, and celebrations give us the energy to move forward. Remember, the most important thing to do in your leadership is recognize effort. Because when people know where they stand, they take risks. They stay committed. They increase their own engagement, because engagement is a choice. It's not something you can make happen. And that, my friends, creates a really cool herd to live and work with. And when it's all over, the celebration is that we all win. And that, my friends, is called bingo.
Somewhere there's a perfect line where your fever is the same as mine. Though I take it everywhere I go, I'm a holdout for a wilder road. Oh, my morning star, show me where you are. There's a fire that's growing a place I know for an old song, and these worn out souls, I can hear it like a lullaby. If you sing it, well then so will I. Oh, my morning star, show me where you are. There's a fire that's growing in me. There's a world that I'm longing to see, where the wind is alive and moves like a song. Yeah, this is where I belong. When the sun breaks the light through the trees, when the sky brings me down to my knees, where the wind is alive and wakes like the dawn.